There's something deep within us, something ancient and undeniable, that thrills at the whisper of legends. For as long as humans have walked the earth, we've been drawn to stories of the divine tales of gods who shaped the world with their hands, of spirits who whispered secrets to mortals, of miracles that defied the laws of nature. These aren't just stories, they're echoes of our ancestors' deepest fears, hopes, and awe for the mysteries of existence. And today, we're stepping into that current of wonder, unraveling 50 of the most astonishing divine legends from cultures lost to time. Picture standing at the edge of a forgotten temple, its stones worn smooth by centuries of devotion. The air hums with the weight of something sacred, something beyond our understanding. That's the feeling we're chasing, the pulse of the divine as it was felt by the ancient world. From the sun-drenched shores of Egypt, where gods walked among pharaohs, to the misty forests of Scandinavia, where Odin traded his eye for wisdom, these stories aren't just myths. They are fragments of a time when the line between heaven and earth was thin enough to touch. What if I told you that some of these legends hold truths modern science is only beginning to grasp? That buried within the allegories and sacred texts are clues to lost technologies, forgotten histories, or even insights into human consciousness itself. This journey isn't just about recounting old tales, it's about listening to what they're still trying to tell us. So let's wander together through the echoes of the divine, where every story is a doorway, and every myth might just be a map to something far greater than we ever imagined. The past is waiting to speak. Are you ready to listen? Long before the first pyramids pierced the horizon, the Sumerians carved their stories into clay, stories of gods who descended from the heavens to shape the world. At the heart of their cosmology stood the Anunnaki, a pantheon of deities whose name literally means those who came down from the sky. According to the world's oldest written creation myth, the Enuma Elish, these celestial beings didn't just watch from above. They rolled up their sleeves and molded the earth from primordial chaos. They divided the seas, raised the mountains, and most astonishingly crafted humanity from clay mixed with the blood of a sacrificed god. But here's where the legend takes a turn that still sparks debate today. Ancient astronaut theorists point to startling details in these texts' descriptions of the Anunnaki as beings who traveled in fiery celestial boats, wielded tools that could cut the earth like butter, and imparted advanced knowledge to their human creations. The Sumerian king list, another ancient text, even mentions rulers with impossibly long lifespans, some reigning for tens of thousands of years. Could these be garbled accounts of visitors from another world, as some suggest? Or are we reading too much into poetic metaphors for natural forces? What's undeniable is the Anunnaki's lasting fingerprint on human culture. Their hierarchical structure, with gods like Enlil ruling the air and Enki governing the waters, mirrored the Sumerians' own societal divisions, blending theology with politics. Temples called ziggurats became stairways to the divine, their stepped pyramids symbolizing the connection between earth and heaven. And when Babylon rose to power, they didn't erase these stories, they absorbed them, reshaping the Anunnaki into the familiar gods of later Mesopotamian empires. Perhaps the most haunting question isn't whether the Anunnaki were extraterrestrials, but why their story resonates so deeply across millennia. In an age before telescopes or microscopes, the Sumerians envisioned a universe where humanity wasn't an accident but a deliberate creation. A universe where the divine wasn't distant but hands-on. Whether as gods, allegories, or something in between, the Anunnaki remind us that every culture asks the same fundamental question: where did we come from, and who or what shaped our destiny? While the Sumerians saw creation as the work of sky-born deities, the ancient Egyptians told a far stranger story, one that began not with order but with chaos. Deep in the religious heart of Hermopolis, priests whispered of the Ogdoad, 8 primordial beings who existed before time itself. 4 frog-headed gods and 4 serpent-headed goddesses, each representing the raw, untamed forces of the universe, darkness and endless waters, silence and the void. Unlike later pantheons of regal, human-like gods, these deities were elemental living embodiments of the formless abyss that predated creation. Their myth begins in a realm where light, land, and life didn't yet exist. The Ogdoad's names reveal their nature: Nun and Nornet, the infinite waters; Kuk and Korkit, the darkness that stretched forever; Ammon and Ammonet, the hidden force of air; and Ha and Horhit, the boundless void. Together, they stirred the cosmic soup of nothingness until their energies collided in a flash of divine alchemy. From that collision rose the first mound of earth, and atop it, the sun god Ra, cradled in a lotus blossom. But here's what makes the Ogdoad extraordinary. They weren't just creators, they were self-erasing. After sparking existence, they retreated into the underworld, their work done. Unlike the Anunnaki, who ruled over humanity, these gods became the silent scaffolding of the universe, invisible yet essential. Temples honored them with pits of water symbolizing Nun's depths, and priests performed rituals in utter darkness to channel Korkit's primal night. Even the layout of Hermopolis mirrored their chaos, its temples deliberately asymmetrical, rejecting the rigid geometry of later Egyptian sacred sites. Modern eyes might see scientific foreshadowing in their myth. The Ogdoad's swirling waters echo today's theories of Earth's early, ocean-covered state, while their self-destruction after creation parallels the Big Bang's moment of cosmic inflation. Scholars debate whether these parallels are coincidence or intuition. Did the priests of Hermopolis glimpse fundamental truths about existence, framing them in the only language they had, myth? What's undeniable is how the Ogdoad's legacy shaped Egypt's spiritual landscape. Later gods like Atum and Ta borrowed their themes of creation from chaos, and the concept of cyclical renewal, central to Egyptian cosmology, traces back to these 8 deities who made the world not through conquest but through surrender. They remind us that every beginning is born from something wilder, something older, and perhaps that's why their cult endured even as other gods rose to prominence, because some truths are too primal to fade. Among the world's great cosmic myths, few are as visually stunning or as morally complex as Hinduism's Samudra Manthan, the churning of the ocean of milk. Picture this: gods and demons, eternal enemies, stand shoulder to shoulder on either end of Vasuki, the king of serpents, wrapped around a mountain. With a titanic tug of war, they churn the primordial waters, not for conquest but for Amrita, the nectar of immortality. It's a scene that bursts with symbolism, where even the tools are alive with meaning. Mount Mandara as the churning rod, its roots digging deep into the cosmic turtle Kerma's back, becomes an axis linking heaven, earth, and the underworld. But why would the Devas, the shining gods, ever collaborate with their sworn foes, the Asuras? Here lies the first lesson of the myth: even light needs darkness to create something greater. The gods, weakened by a curse, realized they couldn't achieve immortality alone. The demons, though embodiments of chaos, held raw power essential for the task. Together, their opposing forces generated the friction needed to stir the ocean's depths, a reminder that balance, not purity, drives creation. Yet the partnership was never equal. Vishnu, in his wisdom, had the demons hold Vasuki's venomous head, while the gods grasped the tail, sparing them the serpent's poisonous breath. A small detail with huge implications. Even in cooperation, the divine plays the long game. As the churning begins, the ocean yields wonders beyond Amrita. First comes Halahala, a lethal poison so potent it threatens to consume the cosmos. Only Shiva, the destroyer, can swallow it, his throat turning blue as he holds the toxicity within himself, a sacrifice that spares existence. Then emerge Kamadhenu, the wish-fulfilling cow, Apsaras, celestial dancers, even the moon, plucked from the waters and placed in Shiva's hair. Each treasure reflects a facet of the universe: creativity, beauty, cyclical time. But the pivotal moment comes with Danvantari, the physician of the gods, rising from the waves with the elixir in hand. What follows is a masterclass in trickster theology. The demons predictably demand the nectar. Vishnu morphs into Mohini, an enchanting goddess who distracts the Asuras with a dance before ensuring only the gods drink the Amrita. It's a controversial twist. Is this deceit or divine justice? The answer may lie in the Rig Veda's warning. Truth is one, though the wise call it by many names. The demons sought immortality for domination, the gods for preservation. The same act carries opposite moral weights based on intent. Modern interpretations see the ocean as consciousness itself, churning not water, but the human mind's depths to uncover enlightenment. The poison we suppress, the treasures we seek, even the betrayals we weather, all part of the soul's journey. And perhaps that's why this myth endures. It's not just about gods and demons. It's about us, our eternal tug of war between ambition and wisdom, our hunger for the eternal, and the price we're willing to pay to touch the divine. Two primordial beings, separated by geography and culture, hold eerie parallels in their world-shaping demises, the Greek Titans and the Norse Ymir. Both colossal figures represented the raw, untamed forces of creation, and both met violent ends that literally forged the cosmos as we know it. Yet their stories diverge in ways that reveal the deepest fears and values of their respective cultures. In Greek mythology, the Titans ruled during the Golden Age, an era of unchecked power and primal energy. Born from Gaia, the earth, and Uranus, the sky, they were giants in every sense, embodiments of natural forces like Oceanus's endless waters and Hyperion's blazing sun. Their reign crumbled when Zeus led the Olympians in a cataclysmic war, casting the Titans into Tartarus. But imprisonment didn't erase them. Instead, their essence lingered, Atlas holding up the heavens, Prometheus's stolen fire sparking human ingenuity, proof that even defeated, the old order shapes the new. Meanwhile, in the frozen north, the Norse saw creation not as a war but a sacrifice. Ymir, the first giant, emerged from the void of Ginnungagap, nourished by the milk of the cosmic cow Ordhamla. When Odin and his brothers slew Ymir, they didn't just topple a ruler, they repurposed him. His flesh became the earth, his blood the seas, his bones the mountains, his skull the sky. Even his eyebrows formed Midgard, the realm of humans. Here, destruction wasn't punitive, but alchemical, a recycling of the divine body into the fabric of existence. The contrast is striking. The Greeks framed their cosmic transition as a moral victory, order over chaos, justice over tyranny. The Titans' imprisonment in Tartarus mirrors human fears of unchecked power, while their residual influence speaks to the inescapable weight of the past. The Norse, however, embraced paradox. Ymir's murder was both brutal and necessary, his death seeding life. There's no Tartarus in Norse myth, only transformation, a reminder that destruction and creation are two sides of the same coin. Modern minds might see these myths as early environmental allegories. The Titan's fate warns of nature's wrath when suppressed, while Ymir's body, reused, not wasted, hints at sustainability. Both stories grapple with the same existential question: how do we build a world from the bones of what came before? Whether through conflict or craftsmanship, these legends insist that creation is never gentle, and that every new beginning demands an ending. The Aztecs didn't believe in a single creation, they believed in five worlds, each with its own sun, its own people, and its own catastrophic end. This was the myth of the Five Suns, a cycle of destruction and rebirth so relentless it makes the apocalypses of other cultures seem almost gentle by comparison. At the heart of this cosmic drama lay a brutal truth. The gods demanded sacrifice, not as punishment, but as payment for existence itself. The first sun, Nahui Oslotl, was a world of giants ruled by Tezcatlipoca, the smoking mirror. Jaguars stalked this era, and when the sun fell from the sky, the earth erupted in darkness, the great cats devouring every last human. Next came Nahui-Ehecatl, the son of wind, where Quetzalcoatl took the throne. This world ended when hurricanes shredded the land, scattering its people into monkeys who clung to the trees, a bizarre twist that hints at early evolutionary intuition. Then Nahui-Quehuatl, the rain sun, where Tlaloc's rain drowned the world in fire and flood, transforming survivors into birds mid-flight. The fourth sun, Nahui-Atl, belonged to Chalchutlicue, the jade-skinned goddess of water. Her era collapsed when the heavens split open, drowning everything in a deluge so profound it turned humans into fish. Each catastrophe wasn't random, it reflected the flaws of its age. The jaguar sun fell because its giants were arrogant. The wind sun collapsed when its people failed to honor Quetzalcoatl. But the fifth sun, Nahui-Olan, the sun of movement, is different. Its survival hinges on a grisly bargain struck at Teotihuacan, where the gods Nanahuatzin and Texistecatl leaped into a divine forge to become the sun and moon. Yet even their sacrifice wasn't enough. The newborn sun refused to move without the fuel of human blood. Thus began the Aztec practice of heart extraction, where priests wielded obsidian blades not out of cruelty but necessity. Without this offering, the fifth sun would halt, plunging the world into eternal night. Modern scholars see layers of meaning in this myth. The five suns mirror the Aztec calendar's cyclical view of time, where history repeats in grand, terrible loops. The emphasis on sacrifice reflects their belief in reciprocity. The gods gave their blood to create humanity, so humans must return the gift. Even the sun's name, Olan, meaning movement, ties to their understanding of the universe as a fragile balance requiring constant effort to sustain. What chills the spine is how the fifth sun's predicted end earthquakes resonates today. The Aztecs believed their world would shatter in tremors, a finale we now know stems from living atop tectonic plates they couldn't have conceived of. Was this intuition or coincidence? Either way, the five suns myth forces a haunting question. If creation demands destruction and survival requires sacrifice, what price are we still paying to keep our own world alive? The Japanese creation myth begins not with light or land, but with a single stirring in the endless cosmic brine. From the floating bridge of heaven, the divine siblings Izanagi and Izanami stood, peering down into the swirling waters below. Armed with a jeweled spear gifted by the elder gods, they churned the primordial sea, and when they lifted the spear, droplets falling from its tip crystallized into the first landmass on Agoro. This wasn't just the birth of an island, it was the moment the gods became architects shaping the world through sacred marriage. Their union, however, was shadowed by a fatal misstep. When Izanami spoke first during their wedding ritual, a breach of celestial etiquette, their first child emerged malformed, a boneless horror they cast adrift on a reed boat. Only after repeating the ceremony correctly, with Izanagi initiating the vows, did they birth the 8 perfect islands of Japan and a pantheon of nature deities. But creation demanded sacrifice. While giving life to Kagetsuchi, the fire god, Izanami's body burned so terribly that her flesh spawned new gods with every scream metal from her vomit, rivers from her urine before she perished, her corpse festering with maggots. What happened next reveals Japan's deepest spiritual taboos. Grief-stricken Izanagi journeyed to Yomi, the underworld, defying Izanami's warning not to look upon her. When he lit a torch, the flame revealed her rotting form, crawling with thunder gods born from decay. Her humiliation transformed into fury. She became death itself, vowing to claim 1,000 lives daily unless Izanagi stayed. His escape, blocking Yomi's entrance with a boulder, eternally severed the living from the dead, while Izanami's curse codified mortality itself. This myth isn't just a story, it's a cultural blueprint. The initial ritual era explains why Japanese tradition prioritizes order and propriety, linking social harmony to cosmic balance. Izanami's descent into impurity mirrors Shinto beliefs about kegare, spiritual pollution requiring purification rituals still practiced at shrines today. Even Kagetsuchi's death hacked apart by Izanagi's sword echoes in the volcanic soil of Japan, where his body's fragments became sacred mountains. The tale warns that creation and destruction are inseparable, life springing from violation, death birthing new gods. Modern scholars see uncanny parallels to volcanic activity, Izanami's burns resembling pyroclastic flows, her underworld roars like subterranean tremors. But perhaps the most haunting legacy is how Izanami, once a life-giver, becomes both mourned and feared. She's venerated at fertility shrines, yet invoked in warnings about unclean spaces, a divine paradox embodying Japan's reverence for cyclical renewal through necessary loss. The Celts didn't see the divine as distant rulers, they felt their gods in the turn of the seasons, the clash of battle, the hum of a craftsman's loom. Among the many figures who walked the blurred line between the mortal realm and the otherworld, 3 stood out as embodiments of the forces that shaped Celtic life. Dagda, the father whose cauldron never emptied, Morrigan, the crow-winged prophetess of war, and Lugh, the master of all arts. Together, they wove a tapestry of power, each thread tied to the festivals that marked the Celtic year, especially Samhain, when the veil between worlds grew thin. Dagda was no aloof sky god, he was a deity of earthy, visceral power. His club could kill with one end and resurrect with the other. His massive cauldron, one of the 4 treasures of the Tuatha De Danann, could feed armies without ever running dry, a symbol of abundance in a world where winter's hunger loomed large. Yet this wasn't just about food. The cauldron also represented rebirth, a theme central to Samhain, when the Celts believed the dead returned to walk among the living. Dagda's union with Morrigan at the river Unius, as recounted in the Liber Gabala Iren, wasn't just a divine tryst, it was a ritual act binding fertility to the coming year's fortunes. His seemingly crude appearance, potbelly, rough tunic masked a cunning mind. When the Fomorians demanded he eat a porridge mound big enough to feed 50, he scraped it clean, proving that true strength lay in wit as much as in muscle. Then there was Morrigan, whose very name means Phantom Queen. Unlike the orderly war gods of Greece or Rome, she thrived in chaos. She could appear as a crow circling the battlefield, a wolf howling at the edge of the forest, or a beautiful woman washing the armor of doomed warriors in the river, a chilling omen known as the Washer at the ford. Her power lay in prophecy and psychological warfare. Her scream could shatter an enemy's courage before blades even crossed. During Samhain, her presence grew palpable. It was said she stood atop the Stone of Fall, whispering the fate of kingdoms into the night wind. Yet for all her ferocity, she was deeply tied to sovereignty. In the Cath Mage Tuatha, she offered her favors to the hero Dagda as a pact, victory in exchange for recognition of her role as the land's spiritual guardian. To ignore her was to invite disaster. Lugh, however, was the polymath of the pantheon, known as Lamfhoda, long-armed, for his reach in skill as much as in body. He mastered everything from blacksmithing to harp playing. His arrival at the court of King Nuada is legendary. When asked what he could contribute, he listed talent after talent until the gatekeeper scoffed. "But do you have one skill no one else possesses?" Lugh's reply, "I am the only one who excels in all." This versatility made him the ideal champion against Balor, the Fomorian tyrant whose death gaze could level armies. Lugh didn't win through brute force. He used a slingstone precision triumphing over raw power. His festival, Lugnasad, celebrated the first harvest, but it was at Samhain that his dual nature shone, both solar hero and liminal figure, bridging the gap between the bright half of the year and the dark. What unites these 3 is how deeply their stories intertwine with the land's rhythms. Dagda's cauldron mirrors the harvest's bounty and the earth's cyclical generosity. Morrigan's battles echo the harshness of winter and the necessity of loss for renewal. Lugh's craftsmanship symbolizes the innovation needed to survive the lean months. Samhain, the festival marking summer's end, was their shared stage, a night when Dagda might share his feast. Morrigan foretold the battles of the coming year, and Lug's wisdom guided the people through the dark. These weren't just gods to worship, they were forces to negotiate with, partners in the eternal dance of survival. Perhaps that's why their legends endure. In a world where the seasons dictated life or death, the Celts didn't need detached omnipotence, they needed deities who got their hands dirty, who understood sacrifice, cunning, and resilience. When modern pagans leave offerings for the Morrigan at crossroads or bake bread in Lug's honor, they're not just reviving old rites, they're tapping into a primal truth that the divine isn't just above us, it's in the soil, the storm, and the skilled hands that turn raw materials into something greater. Before cities crowned Mesopotamia, before even the first brick of Babylon was laid, there was Tiamat, the primordial goddess of salt water, whose vast body was the ocean itself. She wasn't just a deity, she was chaos incarnate, a swirling, roaring force of creation and destruction. And when her children, the younger gods, grew too noisy, too disruptive, she birthed an army of monsters to silence them forever. What followed wasn't just a battle, it was the birth of the universe as the Babylonians knew it. A clash so epic its echoes still resonate in every hero's journey we tell today. Enter Marduk, the storm god of Babylon, young, ambitious, and armed with winds so fierce they could slice mountains. He struck a bargain with the terrified gods, absolute authority in exchange for facing Tiamat. The Enuma Elish, Babylon's creation epic, paints the confrontation with visceral detail. Tiamat's jaws gaped wide enough to swallow stars, her tail thrashing tsunamis into existence. But Marduk, ever the strategist, didn't rely on brute force alone. He unleashed the Imhalu winds, filling her belly like a sail until she couldn't close her mouth, then drove a spear into her distended gut, splitting her body like a shell. Here's where myth becomes metaphor. From Tiamat's corpse, Marduk crafted the world, her ribs arching into the sky, her eyes becoming the Tigris and Euphrates, her venomous blood mixing with clay to forge the first humans. Chaos wasn't erased, it was repurposed, transformed into the scaffolding of order. This duality is key. Unlike other creation myths where chaos is banished, the Babylonians acknowledged its necessity. Tiamat had to exist and be defeated for the world to take shape. Modern storytellers unknowingly echo this ancient template. Think of Star Wars, the rebellion order versus the Empire's chaotic tyranny. Or Lord of the Rings, where Sauron's disintegration allows Middle-earth's rebirth. Even superhero films pit structured justice against anarchic villains like the Joker. The trope isn't just about good defeating evil, it's about the tension between creativity and control. Tiamat's chaos births monsters but also rivers. Marduk's order builds cities but demands submission. Scholars debate whether the myth justified Babylon's political rise, with Marduk's supremacy mirroring the city's dominance over Mesopotamia. Yet the deeper lesson lies in balance. The Babylonians didn't demonize Tiamat, they revered her even in defeat. Her name whispers through every tide, a reminder that creation is messy, violent, and ultimately beautiful. The next time you watch a hero rise from chaos, remember, you're witnessing a story as old as civilization itself, written first in the blood of a goddess and the ambition of a god. Maui, the Polynesian trickster god, didn't just steal fire or slow the sun. He hooked the ocean floor with a fishhook carved from his grandmother's jawbone and hauled entire islands into existence. Imagine the scene, this mischievous demigod paddling his canoe into the pre-dawn darkness, whispering to his brothers about the biggest catch they'd ever seen. What they didn't know, his bait wasn't just any lure, it was his own blood smeared on the hook to tempt the ancient god of the deep. With a heave that shook the heavens, Maui yanked the line, and the seafloor erupted, not with fish, but with smoking, steaming landmasses we now know as Hawaii, Aotearoa, and the other jewels of Polynesia. But here's where the legend gets sly. Maui's brothers, jealous and impatient, ignored his warning to wait until the land fully surfaced. They hacked at the still-forming islands, breaking them into fragments, which is why, as any Hawaiian will tell you, the archipelago isn't one solid mass but a chain of peaks and valleys. It's a story that blends audacity with a cautionary punch. Even divine power has its limits when human greed jumps the gun. Geologists raise an eyebrow at this tale because beneath the myth lies a startling truth. The Polynesian islands were literally fished up from the sea by volcanic activity. Maui's hook, some scholars suggest, mirrors the plumes of magma that built these landmasses over millennia. The brothers chopping, a poetic nod to the tectonic forces that fracture the earth. Even the bloodbait finds eerie resonance. Lava, when it meets seawater, oxidizes into the same rust-red hue as dried blood. Maui's antics weren't just about landmaking. In Tahitian versions, he used the same hook to snag the sun itself, forcing it to move slower so his mother could dry her topper cloth, a myth that mirrors the Polynesians' mastery of celestial navigation. Every exploit, no matter how playful, carried a lesson. The gods are powerful, but cleverness bends the rules. What makes Maui endure isn't just his heroism, but his humanity. He's a god who gets sunburned, who bungles spells, who argues with his grandmother's bones. His legends don't glorify perfection, they celebrate the scrappy, inventive spirit that turned scattered voyagers into the greatest navigators the world has ever known. So the next time you stand on a volcanic shore, remember, this land might just be Maui's leftovers, half chewed by impatient hands but still mighty enough to defy the sea. In the deep forests and rolling plains of ancient Slavic lands, two gods waged an endless battle not just against each other, but for the very soul of creation itself. On one side stood Perun, the thunder-wielding lord of the sky, his axe crackling with divine lightning. On the other slithered Veels, the horned god of the underworld, his form shifting between serpent, bear, and a whispering, shadowed man. Their feud wasn't just a mythic spat. It was the Slavic answer to the clash between order and chaos, storm and soil, the world above and the mysteries below. Perun ruled from the heights of the world tree, his domain stretching across the heavens. When he rode his chariot through the clouds, the earth trembled. His laughter was thunder, his anger the strike of lightning splitting oaks in half. Farmers prayed to him for rain, warriors invoked his name before battle, and kings swore oaths beneath his sacred groves. He was the enforcer of cosmic law, the divine warrior who kept the world from slipping into anarchy. Where Perun's axe fell, boundaries were drawn between villages and wilderness, justice and lawlessness. Veels, meanwhile, dwelled in Nav, the Slavic underworld, but don't mistake him for some simple god of death. He was the keeper of cattle, the patron of merchants and magic, the trickster who led heroes astray just as often as he gifted them hidden knowledge. His realm wasn't just a land of the dead, it was the source of all hidden potential. Springs bubbled up from his domain, snakes carried his whispers, and the roots of the world tree drank deep from his waters. Where Perun stood for structure, Veels embodied the untamed forces that refused to be bound, the flood that erased property lines, the wolf that stole sheep, the creative spark that defied tradition. Their battles weren't confined to legend. Every time lightning struck a tree, the Slavs saw Perun driving Veels from the branches where he hid. When storms flooded valleys, it was Veels retaliating with stolen waters. Even the seasons reflected their struggle. Perun's thunderstorms dominated summer, while Veel's misty breath crept over the land in winter. Yet this wasn't a simple fight between good and evil. Like yin and yang, each god needed the other. Without Veel's chaos, Perun's order would stagnate. Without Perun's fury, Veel's entropy would consume everything. The most telling moment comes in an old Kivian legend. When Perun finally corners Veels and burns him to ash, the horned god doesn't stay dead. His remains seep into the earth, nurturing next year's harvest, and he rises again, wilder, wiser. The Slavs understood what modern minds often forget. Chaos isn't the enemy of order, it's the soil from which order grows. So the next time you hear distant thunder or spot a snake in the grass, remember, you're witnessing the latest round in the oldest battle, where even the gods know some fights aren't meant to be won, just endlessly, beautifully renewed. High in the Andes, where the air thins and the stones whisper, the Inca told of Viracocha, a god who didn't just shape the world but wept it into being. Unlike other creator deities who forged humanity from clay or blood, Viracocha's tears carried the spark of life itself. After sculpting the first giants from stone, only to drown them in a flood when they grew proud, he wandered the earth in sorrow, his grief carving rivers into the mountainside. Where those salty drops fell, new humans sprouted like wild quinoa, their souls born from divine sorrow. But Viracocha wasn't just a weeper, he was a wanderer, a teacher. Dressed as a ragged beggar, he traveled from village to village, testing hearts. Those who showed kindness received wisdom, knowledge of crops, textiles, and the sacred art of fitting stones so tightly a blade of grass couldn't slip between them. Those who mocked him faced his staff's wrath turned to stone where they stood, becoming the jagged outcrops that still litter the Andes. This duality captures the Inca worldview. Creation and destruction weren't opposites, but two hands of the same god. The proof, they said, lay in the stones. At Tiwanaku's Gate of the Sun, Viracocha's carved figure weeps while holding thunderbolts, his face streaming with tears that mirror the canals cutting through the sacred site. Nearby, the mysteriously precise walls of Sacsayhuaman, massive boulders interlocking like puzzle pieces, were believed to be petrified giants, their frozen forms a warning against hubris. Even today, Quechua elders speak of laki, a word meaning both sadness and the fertile soil left by glacial tears. Modern archaeologists note something uncanny. Many Inca monuments align with the June solstice sunrise when the first rays illuminate Viracocha's stone tears like liquid gold. Was this intentional, a way to ritually reenact the moment life sprang from grief? The answer may lie in the Incas' own origin myth. They claimed their founders emerged from Lake Titicaca's depths, water birthed from water, carrying a divine mandate to build an empire where the earthly and celestial mirrored each other. What chills the spine is how these legends echo Andean reality. The region's terraced agriculture relies on mountain springs fed by glacial melt, literal tears of the mountains sustaining life. Viracocha's duality, destroyer and nurturer, wanderer and architect, mirrors the Andes themselves, where landslides bury villages even as volcanic ash enriches the soil. His story isn't just myth, it's a survival manual carved into the land, teaching that from loss comes renewal, and even gods must weep to make the world grow. The Yoruba pantheon doesn't sit on some distant, untouchable Olympus. Its gods laugh, love, and lose their tempers in ways that feel startlingly human. At the heart of this divine court stand the Orishas, beings as complex as the people who worship them. Take Oshun, goddess of rivers and sweet waters, who wears gold like sunlight on the waves and dances with hypnotic grace. But cross her, and those same waters turn turbulent. Her legendary fury scorched an entire village to ashes when they mocked her inability to bear children. Yet she's also the healer who taught humanity herbal medicine, the patron of artists and the broken-hearted, her compassion as deep as the Osun River that bears her name. Then there's Shango, the thunder god who wields twin axes and dresses in fiery red. His myths read like a warrior king's epic, a mortal ruler who hungered for power, ascended to godhood but never outran his flaws. He's the patron of justice who once executed an innocent man in a rage, the charismatic lover whose affairs sparked divine feuds, the ruler who preferred drumbeats to decrees. When lightning splits the sky, it's said to be Shango challenging the world to a dance-off, or maybe just throwing one of his infamous tantrums. What makes these deities extraordinary isn't just their power, but their imperfections. Unlike the detached omnipotence of many creator gods, the Orishas are entangled in the messiness of existence. Ogun, the iron-wielding god of war and craftsmanship, struggles with his bloodlust even as he forges tools for peace. Ymir, mother of the seas, shelters orphans yet drowns the arrogant without remorse. This isn't morality plays its divinity with dirt under its nails, gods who have tasted regret. Their resonance in the diaspora, from Cuban Santeria to Brazilian candomblé, stems from this very humanity. Enslaved Africans didn't just preserve these stories, they reshaped them into lifelines. When Shango's thunder roared over plantations, it wasn't just weather, it was defiance. Ocean's rivers became secret baptismal sites where forbidden identities survived. The Orisha's flaws made them relatable to people surviving impossible circumstances, proving that even gods must sometimes stumble before they rise. In the baked clay tablets of Mesopotamia, where kings once pressed their seals into wet earth, three figures stand apart, not quite gods, not merely men, but something in between. Gilgamesh, the swaggering king of Uruk who built walls so high they scraped the heavens. Enkidu, the wild man molded from clay by the gods to humble him. And Utnapishtim, the lone survivor of a divine flood who cheated death itself. Together, they form Mesopotamia's answer to life's oldest questions. Why must we die? Can friendship outlast the grave? And what happens when the gods decide humanity isn't worth saving? Gilgamesh begins his tale as a tyrant, 2/3 divine, 1/3 human, and all arrogance. He claims the right to sleep with brides on their wedding nights, to crush any who defy him. In response, the gods craft Enkidu, a being of matted hair and uncanny strength, raised by gazelles in the wilderness. Their first meeting is a battle that shakes Uruk's walls, but from the dust emerges something unexpected. Respect, then kinship, then a love so fierce it transforms them both. Enkidu learns the ways of men, how to eat bread, wear clothes, interpret dreams. Gilgamesh learns humility, his heart cracked open by this wild mirror of himself. Their adventures slaying the demon Humbaba, defying the goddess Ishtar are legendary, but the true magic lies in their bond. When Enkidu dies, struck down by the gods for their hubris, Gilgamesh doesn't just mourn. He unravels, howling like a beast, refusing to wash his friend's burial scent from his skin for days. His grief isn't poetic, it's visceral, raw, human. This is where the epic pivots from heroism to something deeper. Gilgamesh abandons his throne, wandering the earth in animal skins, obsessed with one question: how can I escape death? His quest leads him to Utnapishtim, the Mesopotamian Noah, who survived the god's wrath by building an ark at the whisper of the trickster god E. The flood myth here predates the Bible by centuries, torrents so violent even the gods cowered, regretting their decision to wipe out humanity. Utnapishtim's reward, immortality, but when Gilgamesh begs for the secret, the old man sets an impossible test: stay awake for 7 days. Exhausted, Gilgamesh fails within moments. The message stings: immortality isn't for mortals, no matter how great. Yet Utnapishtim offers a consolation prize, a plant from the seafloor that restores youth. Gilgamesh finally has hope until a snake steals it while he bathes. In that moment, the serpent sheds its skin, reborn, while the king weeps for his lost chance. The irony is brutal. Renewal exists in nature, just not for humans, but there's wisdom in the ending. Returning to Uruk's towering walls, Gilgamesh carves their story into stone, realizing that while flesh perishes, legacy doesn't. What makes these demigods timeless isn't their strength, but their flaws. Enkidu's death mirrors our own terror of losing those we love. Utnapishtim's flood echoes across cultures, from the Hindu Manu to the Hades raven, proving how deeply catastrophe is woven into human memory. And Gilgamesh, his rage against mortality is ours too, but the epic's real revelation is subtler. Perhaps living fully matters more than living forever. After all, 4,000 years later, we're still reading his story, and in that, he found the only immortality that ever truly lasts. Before light, before land, before even the concept of time, there was only a swirling, formless chaos curled tight inside a cosmic egg. This was the world according to ancient China, a void where yin and yang hadn't yet learned to dance. Then, after 18,000 years of silence, something stirred. Pangu, the first being, stretched inside that shell, his limbs pressing against the darkness until it cracked open. The lighter parts of the egg floated upward, becoming the heavens, the heavier sank, thickening into earth. And Pangu, he stood between them, arms raised to hold the sky aloft, feet planted to steady the land, growing taller each day to keep them apart. For another 18,000 years, he labored until at last, certain the cosmos wouldn't collapse, he let himself rest. And in that moment, his body became the world itself. His breath gusted out as wind and clouds, his voice rolled into thunder, his left eye burned into the sun, his right cooled into the moon. Blood pumped from his veins, carving rivers, muscles spread across valleys, bones hardened into jade and quartz, fleas clinging to his skin. They became fish, birds, all the creatures of the earth. Even his sweat turned to nourishing rain. This wasn't just death, it was transformation so complete that Pangu's very essence threaded through creation, his sacrifice ensuring balance. Taoist sages later saw profound truth in this myth. Pangu's act mirrors the Tao itself, the harmony of opposing forces. His upward stretching arms embody yang, active, bright, ascending. His downward rooted legs embody yin, receptive, dark, grounding. The mountains his spine became, they're the earth's yang, jutting boldly toward heaven. The rivers from his blood, they're yin, flowing softly through the land. Even the numbers hold meaning 18,000 years twice over, echoing the Chinese reverence for cycles, and the number 918 being its double, which represents completion and the emperor's mandate. Modern geologists might chuckle at the tale, but they can't deny its poetic resonance. Pangu's body breaking apart mirrors tectonic shifts that raise mountains and floodplains. His breath as wind aligns with atmospheric currents. His sweat as rain reflects the water cycle. And isn't it haunting how closely his form, arms up, legs down, resembles the ancient Chinese character for human Chinese letter, a figure standing between sky and earth. The myth's deepest lesson isn't about origins but responsibility. Pangu didn't just create the world, he became it, his flesh woven into every stone and stream. In a culture that worships ancestors, this suggests we aren't separate from nature but kin to it. To pollute a river isn't just harm, it's sacrilege, a blow to the body of the God who made us. So the next time you see a mountain silhouetted against the dawn, remember, you might be staring at the bones of a giant still holding up the sky, deep in the red dust of Australia, where the horizon shimmers in the midday heat. The oldest stories on Earth still hum through the land. To the Aboriginal peoples, the Dreamtime isn't myth, it's the living memory of creation itself, a time when ancestral beings shaped the world through song and movement. And none of these beings is more awe-inspiring than the rainbow serpent, a deity as vast as the continent, as old as the stars. Where it slithered, rivers carved themselves into the earth. Where it rested, waterholes bubbled up from the depths. Its scales shimmered with every color of the desert sunset, and its anger could shake the earth into famine or flood. This isn't just a story, it's a map, a law book, and a warning etched into the very bones of the land. The proof lies in ancient hands, in Arnhem Land's X-ray caves. Paintings over 20,000 years old depict the serpent's sinuous form, its body adorned with cross-hatched patterns that mirror the sacred clan designs still used today. At Ymir, a rock shelter shows the serpent coiled around a group of human figures, not as a monster, but as a creator, bestowing gifts upon those who honor it. These aren't mere illustrations, they're ceremonial blueprints, teaching each generation how to live in balance with the serpent's power. Disturb its waters and droughts follow. Respect its cycles and the land blooms. But the rainbow serpent isn't just a force of nature, it's a moral compass. In the Yolngu tradition, the serpent's journey across the land established the first trade routes, connecting tribes through shared songlines. Its venom holds the secret of initiation rites. Its shedding skin symbolizes rebirth. Even its colors carry meaning: red for the earth, blue for the life-giving monsoons, yellow for the sacred ochre used in ceremonies. To call it a snake would be like calling the ocean a puddle. It's a cosmic architect weaving the physical and spiritual worlds together. Modern geologists have stumbled upon eerie parallels. The serpent's path often aligns with actual fault lines and underground aquifers, places where water mysteriously surfaces in the desert. The swirling patterns in its cave paintings resemble aerial views of river deltas. Could these stories encode ancient observations of seismic activity or hydrological cycles? The Warlpiri people would say it's simpler than that. The land remembers the serpent's movements because the serpent is the land, alive and watching even now. What chills the spine is how these legends mirror Aboriginal survival. In a continent where water means life, the serpent's tales teach where to find hidden springs, when to expect rains, how to avoid flash floods. Its wrath, droughts, storms isn't arbitrary punishment, but consequence for broken taboos. Unlike Western myths where dragons must be slain, here the monster is sacred, a reminder that the world isn't ours to dominate but to converse with. So the next time you see a rainbow arcing over the outback, remember, that's not just refracted light. It's the serpent moving between worlds, its scales glinting with the promise of creation and the whisper of a warning that some forces are too vast, too ancient to ever fully comprehend, only to honor. High above the blood-soaked battlefields of the Viking Age, figures cloaked in feathers circled like storm clouds, the Valkyries, Odin's handmaidens, whose very name meant choosers of the slain. These weren't the delicate angels of later myth. These were warriors themselves, armored in chainmail that gleamed like ice, riding winged horses whose hooves thundered across the sky. When swords clashed below, the Valkyries didn't just observe. They directed the chaos, their spears tipping fate's scales to decide who fell and who prevailed. But their true power lay in what happened after the last blow landed, plucking fallen warriors from the mud with a touch, resurrecting them midair as their mortal wounds sealed, then spiriting them away to Valhalla's mead-soaked halls. The selection process wasn't random. Dying bravely wasn't enough. You had to die well. Sagas describe the Valkyries passing over warriors who cowered or begged, even if they'd fought fiercely moments before. The ideal death, weapon in hand, laughing at doom, your final strike landing true even as your own life bled out. This obsession with a good death shaped Viking funerals too. Chieftains were buried upright in their longships, swords gripped tight, surrounded by sacrificed horses and hounds so they'd arrive in style. A famed skaldic poem describes a Valkyrie welcoming the dead not with pity but a toast. Why do you tremble? Your axe bit deep, why fear the feast? Valhalla itself was less a paradise than an eternal training camp. Each morning, the Einherjar, the chosen dead, woke to spar, their wounds magically healing by dusk so they could feast all night on a boar that resurrected daily, its flesh sustaining them for Ragnarok's final battle. The Valkyries traded armor for flowing gowns to serve mead, but make no mistake, these were still battle-hardened deities. One saga tells of Brynhildr, a Valkyrie stripped of her role for defying Odin, who retaliated by cursing the mortal hero Sigurd with a doom as vicious as any battlefield fate. Modern archaeology reveals how deeply these beliefs ran. Graves from Denmark to Iceland contain weapons ritually killed, swords bent, spearheads snapped, not to disarm the dead, but to send them armed into the next life. A mass grave in Sweden held men buried with gaming pieces clutched in their hands, ready for Valhalla's endless contests. Even the infamous Blood Eagle execution might have been a twisted homage, spreading ribs like wings to mimic the Valkyrie's flight. What's chilling is how the Valkyrie myth mirrors Viking reality. These were people who composed poetry mid-combat, who measured wealth in stories, not coin. To them, Valhalla wasn't just reward, it was cultural survival, a warrior's renown in death ensured his lineage thrived. Sagas etched his name into eternity. The Valkyries weren't just psychopomps, they were historians with spears, curating the stories that would outlast stone. Among the humid jungles of Mesoamerica, where howler monkeys shriek through the canopy and cenotes plunge into endless darkness, the Maya told of two brothers who played a ball game with death itself. Hunahpu and Xbalanque, the hero twins, weren't just warriors or tricksters, they were cosmic athletes whose story unfolds in the Popol Vuh, a sacred text so revered that Spanish friars burning Maya codices missed its hidden survival. Their legend isn't merely entertainment, it's a masterclass in resilience, cunning, and the price of arrogance, set in a netherworld where the stakes weren't victory but existence. It all began with their father and uncle, the original ball players, whose thunderous games annoyed the lords of Xibalba, the Maya underworld. Invited to compete below ground, the older brothers walked straight into a trap. The death gods offered them a bench which was really a searing hot cooking stone. They served food, but it was laced with poisoned peppers. One by one, the tests broke them until they were sacrificed, their skulls hung in a gourd tree as trophies. When a young maiden passed beneath that tree, one skull spat into her hand, miraculously conceiving the twins who'd avenge them. Right from birth, Hunahpu and Xbalanque were marked by destiny, their cradle rocking not with lullabies but the whispers of the dead. As they grew, the twins honed skills no mortal could match. Hunahpu, the marksman, could shoot a dart through a spear's eye from a league away. Xbalanque, the strategist, talked jaguars into becoming house pets. But their greatest weapon wasn't strength, it was psychology. When Xibalba's lord sent owls to lure them underground, the twins didn't cower like their father. They outsmarted every test, offered the same scorching bench they refused to sit. Given poisoned food, they ate by hiding it under their clothes. Even the infamous dark house, a pitch-black chamber filled with razor bats, couldn't trap them. They slept atop their blowguns, letting the blades whir harmlessly below. Then came the ball game, the heart of the myth. Played in stone courts that still dot Maya ruins, this wasn't just sport, it symbolized the sun's daily battle through the underworld. The twins' opponents weren't mere athletes, they were gods who controlled life and death. The court sloped dangerously, the rubber ball weighed as much as a human head, and the rules bent at Xibalba's whim. Yet the twins adapted, letting the lords win, at first sacrificing Hunahpu in a staged beheading only for him to rise unharmed. The final trick was exquisite. They sacrificed a volunteer, then resurrected him, enticing the death gods to volunteer next. "Do it to us," they begged. When the twins obliged but left them dead, Xibalba's power crumbled. What makes this legend endure isn't just its thrills, but its layered wisdom. The twins' victories hinged on understanding their enemy's vanity, the same flaw that doomed their father. The ball game wasn't brute force, it was theater, exposing how fear rules even gods. Today, Maya descendants still recount these trials during rituals, seeing in them life's cyclical nature, that every defeat can seed a comeback if you're clever enough to play the long game. So the next time you see an ancient ball court, remember, those worn stones once echoed with more than sport. They held the heartbeat of a story about outlasting darkness, one cunning move at a time. Long before the concept of heaven and hell crystallized in Western thought, a blazing vision of cosmic duality emerged from the Persian plateau, one that would echo through the ages. At its heart stood Ahura Mazda, the radiant lord of wisdom, his very name meaning illuminated thought. Opposing him wasn't just another god, but his twisted shadow, Angra Mainyu, the destructive spirit whose essence was corruption itself. This wasn't merely a battle of deities, it was the first great archetype of good versus evil, a template that would silently shape Judaism, Christianity, and Islam centuries later. The stakes couldn't have been higher. Ahura Mazda didn't rule from some distant throne. He was woven into the fabric of existence, his divine light manifesting as a Shah, the cosmic order of truth, justice, and balance. Rivers flowed because he willed them to nourish the land. Fire burned clean and bright as his earthly symbol, a beacon against deception. But Angra wasn't content to lurk in some underworld. He was active sabotage, poisoning water, twisting men's minds with a lie, even smothering sacred flames with smoke. His weapons weren't just supernatural, they were the everyday temptations of greed, laziness, and cruelty. Zoroastrians saw this conflict playing out everywhere. A farmer irrigating his fields served Ahura Mazda. One who hoarded water for himself fed Angra chaos. Unlike earlier myths where gods battled over power or pride, this was existential, a war for the soul of creation itself. The prophet Zoroaster's revelation cut through like lightning. Humanity wasn't just spectators in this struggle, but soldiers. Every choice to create, to heal, to speak truth was a blow against the darkness. Even mundane acts, burying a rotting corpse to prevent disease or planting a tree, became sacred duties. What's astonishing is how deeply this duality seeped into other faiths. The Jewish concept of Satan evolved during the Babylonian exile, where captive priests encountered Zoroastrianism's stark divide between light and dark. Early Christians adopted the idea of a final judgment where souls were divided, a direct parallel to Zoroaster's Chinvat bridge where deeds were weighed. Islam's Shaitan whispers corruption much like Angra while heaven's gardens mirror the Zoroastrian vision of paradise, even the three wise men who followed a star to Bethlehem. Likely Zoroastrian magi drawn by their own prophecies of light's triumph. Archaeology confirms the faith's reach. A 4,000-year-old seal from Turkmenistan shows a figure battling a serpent, an early prototype of the struggle. Persepolis's ruins still bear carvings of Pharaohs, winged symbols of divine grace hovering above kings. And in Mumbai's fire temples, sacred flames burn uninterrupted for centuries, tended by priests who recite hymns in the ancient Avestan tongue. Yet the most profound legacy lies in Zoroaster's radical hope. Unlike the Norse, who foresaw gods and men falling together at Ragnarök, or the Greeks with their capricious deities, he taught that Ahura Mazda would ultimately prevail. The world wasn't doomed to endless cycles of violence. It was a battlefield where light, though besieged, would one day rise unbroken. In an age of uncertainty, that conviction still ignites something primal, the belief that our smallest acts of courage tip the cosmic scales. In the rugged highlands of Greece, where the air hummed with the scent of burning laurel leaves, three sacred sites whispered with the voices of gods Delphi, Dodona, and the distant Siwa. These weren't just temples, they were the ancient world's hotlines to the divine, where rulers and peasants alike journeyed to have their futures unraveled. At Delphi, the most famous of the oracles, a simple question could shift the fate of empires. The Pythia, the priestess who channeled Apollo's prophecies, didn't speak in clear verses. Her words came in riddles dripping with ambiguity, forcing seekers to wrestle with meaning. When King Croesus of Lydia asked if he should wage war on Persia, she told him he would destroy a great empire. He assumed victory, only to realize too late the empire in ruins was his own. Dodona, nestled in the whispering oaks of Epirus, offered a different kind of divine conversation. Here, priests interpreted the rustling leaves and the clanging of bronze cauldrons stirred by the wind, a language of nature rather than human speech. Alexander the Great made the arduous journey here before launching his conquests, needing assurance that Zeus himself blessed his ambitions. The oracle's approval wasn't just spiritual comfort, it was political artillery, legitimizing his campaigns to skeptical generals. Then there was Siwa, a shimmering mirage in the Egyptian desert where the god Ammon spoke through a priestly caste. Its isolation made it mythic. Hercules and Perseus were said to have sought its wisdom. But its most famous visitor was Alexander again, who trekked through treacherous sands to ask if he was truly the son of Zeus. The oracle's reply, whatever it was, fueled his transformation from mortal king to living god, a title he wielded to unite cultures under his rule. These oracles didn't just predict the future, they shaped it. Cities rose or fell based on their pronouncements. Wars were declared or abandoned. Leaders who ignored them risked rebellion. After all, if the gods opposed you, why should the people follow? Yet the oracles' real power lay in their duality. They were divine enough to command awe, but human enough to be swayed. Temples amassed wealth from donations by those seeking favorable prophecies. Ambassadors from rival city-states jockeyed for priority in line, knowing the first interpretation could tilt alliances. What's fascinating isn't just their influence, but their longevity. Delphi functioned for over 1,000 years, outlasting empires, maybe because they offered something rare in the ancient world, not certainty, but the illusion of control in a chaotic universe. Even when their predictions failed, the fault lay not with the gods, but mortal misinterpretation. The riddles forced introspection, the rustling leaves demanded attention to nature's patterns, the desert silence taught patience. In the end, the real magic of these places wasn't just hearing the divine, it was learning how to listen. The ground shakes first, a deep, growling tremor felt in the bones before it's heard with the ears. Then the sky ignites. Rivers of molten rock carve their way down mountainsides, swallowing forests, roads, everything in their path. This isn't just geology to the people of Hawaii, it's the signature of a goddess. Pele, the fire deity whose temper burns as hot as the lava she commands, doesn't just inhabit volcanoes. She is the volcano, her body the land itself, her anger and sorrow written in every eruption. Her legend begins with betrayal. Forced to flee her homeland of Tahiti after a bitter conflict with her sister, the sea goddess Namoka, Pele sailed across the Pacific, thrusting her staff into each island she reached, searching for a place where the earth would accept her fire. Kauai's cliffs were too damp, Oahu's valleys too soft, until at last she struck the fiery heart of Kilauea on Hawaii Island. Here, she dug her final fire pit, Hailmayumu, a cauldron of flame that would become her eternal home. Yet even now, her restlessness echoes in Kilauea's constant activity. Scientists measure magma flows and tectonic shifts. Hawaiians see Pele pacing, her footsteps shaking the ground as she remembers old wounds. Modern sightings of Pele read like something from a ghost story, except the witnesses are park rangers, pilots, and geologists. In 1987, a tourist's photograph of Kilauea's lava flows revealed a woman's face in the steam, her features etched in fire. Locals didn't blink. She's reminding us she's watching, one Kupuna elder noted. Then there's the infamous Pele's curse, the misfortune said to strike those who steal volcanic rocks from the islands. Park officers receive boxes of returned stones daily, accompanied by apology letters from thieves recounting broken bones, failed marriages, and financial ruin. The U.S. Geological Survey dismisses it as superstition, but Hawaiian families nod knowingly. Pele takes what's hers. Her power isn't just destruction. When lava submerged the town of Kalapana in 1990, residents mourned until new black sand beaches formed, spawning ecosystems richer than before. Pele's wrath, like her love, is regenerative. Offerings left at her crater, red lehua flowers, gin her drink of choice, or chance aren't bribes but exchanges. She gives us land, we give her respect, explains a cultural practitioner. This reciprocity defines Hawaiian spirituality. Nowhere is Pele's duality clearer than in her current battle with developers. As luxury homes creep toward sacred slopes, eruptions keep burning them back. Insurance companies call it volcanic risk, Hawaiians call it justice. Pele may be a myth to outsiders, but here, she's a living force reminding us that some ground is too sacred to pave, and some fires too ancient to extinguish. The gates of the Mesopotamian underworld didn't open for just anyone, but Ishtar, goddess of love and war, wasn't just anyone. Clad in her sacred jewels and a cloak of authority, she stood before the entrance to Urkala, the land of no return, and demanded entry. This wasn't a plea, it was a challenge. The myth of Ishtar's descent, etched into clay tablets over 4,000 years ago, isn't just another underworld journey. It's a raw, unflinching portrait of divine hubris and humanity, with twists that would make even Persephone's story pale in comparison. Unlike the Greek maiden whisked away by Hades, Ishtar marches into the underworld willingly, not as a victim but as a conqueror. Her motives are murky. Some tablets suggest she sought to overthrow her sister Ereshkigal, queen of the dead. Others imply she was chasing a lost lover, the vegetation god Tammuz. But the real shock isn't why she went, it's what happened next. At each of Urkala's 7 gates, the gatekeeper strips her, not just of her jewels but of her very identity. Her crown symbolizing power, her lapis lazuli necklace embodying allure, even the garments on her back. By the time she stands naked before Ereshkigal's throne, Ishtar is no longer a goddess but a shivering shadow. Ereshkigal, often painted as a monstrous figure, isn't evil here. She's justice incarnate. She fastens the eye of death upon Ishtar, turning her to a rotting corpse hung on a hook. The consequences are immediate. On Earth, love vanishes, animals refuse to mate, crops wither, and human passion turns to ash. The other gods panic. Without Ishtar's vitality, the world is dying. Even god of wisdom, can't bypass Urkala's laws, so he crafts a loophole. A genderless being slips into the underworld and tricks Ereshkigal into reviving Ishtar with the water of life. But escape demands payment. As Ishtar retraces her steps, reclaiming her attributes at each gate, someone must take her place. Tammuz, her lover, is chosen, though his sister volunteers to share his sentence, ensuring he only spends half the year in darkness, a clear parallel to Persephone's cycle. What makes this myth revolutionary is its unflinching look at vulnerability. Ishtar isn't just a powerful goddess brought low, she's a deity who learns empathy through suffering. Her resurrection isn't triumphant, it's bittersweet, weighted with the cost of another's pain. The story also flips traditional gender roles. Ereshkigal, a female ruler of death, holds absolute authority. Ishtar's dual role as lover and warrior defies categorization. Even the resolution hinges on female sacrifice, Tammuz's sister's willingness to endure the underworld so life can continue above. Modern feminists see this as more than myth. Ishtar's journey mirrors the stripping of women's agency throughout history and the fierce resilience required to reclaim it. The seasonal return of Tammuz echoes agricultural cycles, but also the cyclical nature of oppression and liberation. Unlike Greek myths where Zeus dictates fate, here goddesses drive the narrative. That's why this tale, buried in ruins for millennia, feels startlingly contemporary. It's not about gods and monsters, it's about power, loss, and what we're forced to leave behind in order to survive. Deep in the primeval forests of ancient Europe, where moonlight barely pierced the dense canopy, the sound of hoofbeats thundered through the night, not from any ordinary stag, but from a being who was both man and beast. Cernunnos, the antlered god of the Celts, sat astride no horse. He was the hunt itself, his massive rack silhouetted against the moon as he led a ghostly procession known as the Wild Hunt. This wasn't just a story, it was a living ritual echoing shamanic trances, forest magic, and the primal terror of being pursued by something far older than civilization. Carved into the Gundestrup cauldron over 2,000 years ago, Cernunnos sits cross-legged, a torque around his neck and another in his hand, symbols of both nobility and sacrifice. Serpents coil around his antlers, whispering secrets only the initiated could hear. To the Celts, he wasn't just a hunter, he was the gatekeeper between worlds, a deity who could summon herds from the mist or vanish into the trees like smoke. His hunt wasn't merely spectral, it was a force of nature, sweeping up lost souls, restless spirits, and sometimes the unlucky living who dared wander too far into the woods at Samhain. The eerie parallels between Cernunnos and Siberian shamans are impossible to ignore. Both wore antlered headdresses to channel the stag's wisdom. Both traversed the spirit world, and both served as mediators between humans and the unseen. Even the Celts' use of hallucinogenic fungi like Amanita muscaria mirrors shamanic rituals, suggesting Cernunno's followers may have sought visions of his otherworldly cavalcade. But the hunt's legacy didn't fade with the Celts. It morphed into Odin's furious ride across Norse skies, into Herne the Hunter haunting Windsor Forest, even into Arthurian legends of a black stag leading knights into the unknown. Each iteration carried the same warning: some forces can't be tamed, only witnessed. Modern pagans still leave offerings at oak groves, acknowledging what science can't explain, that sometimes in the hush before dawn, the trees still tremble at the passing of something ancient, wild, and utterly untamed. Her first step shatters the universe. From the void she emerges, black as the space between stars, her tongue lolling red with blood, her necklace strung with freshly severed heads. Kali, the Hindu goddess of destruction, wears chaos like a crown, and yet to those who truly know her, she is not the monster outsiders fear, but the mother the universe cannot live without. At first glance, her imagery chills the blood. Skirt of dismembered arms, check. Skull cup brimming with demon's blood, absolutely. The corpse she stands upon isn't just for shock value, it's her own husband, Shiva, the god of transformation. But here's the twist: every gruesome detail is a cosmic necessity. Those heads, their ego incarnate, chopped away to free the soul. The blood, not mindless violence, but the life force of the demon Raktabija, whose every drop spawned new monsters until Kali drank them dry. Even Shiva beneath her feet isn't a victim. He's the calm to her storm, willingly lying down to stop her rampage from consuming creation itself. This isn't senseless destruction, it's surgery on a universal scale. Dig deeper and Kali's duality dazzles. She's often called Dark Mother, a title that holds oceans of meaning. Bengali villagers leave offerings at her feet not out of terror, but gratitude, for she's the force that slays inner demons, the protector who eats suffering so her children don't have to. Tantric practitioners whisper her mantras not to summon wrath, but to invoke the fierce love that burns away illusion. Even her iconic tongue, so often misread as savage, sticks out in embarrassment after she accidentally steps on Shiva, a moment of divine humility humanizing the cosmic destroyer. Modern feminists reclaim her as an icon of female rage turned righteous. Her wild hair defies patriarchal order, her nakedness flaunts liberation from shame. When Indian revolutionaries fought British rule, Kali's image rallied them not because she preached violence, but because she embodied the unapologetic strength needed to dismantle oppression. Yet in homes across India, she's also the gentle Kali Ma, cradling devotees like infants, her very name meaning she who erases time's wounds. Perhaps her greatest lesson lies in what she destroys and what she spares. Kali doesn't annihilate indiscriminately, she targets only what stifles growth. Like a forest fire that clears dead wood for new seedlings, her dance of destruction makes rebirth possible. So the next time you see her garish depictions, look closer. That blood isn't just spilled, it's the ink rewriting existence. Those fangs don't just bite, they sever the chains of fear. And the mother who dances on the edge of oblivion, she's the one keeping the world alive. In the gold-lit halls of Egypt's temples, where incense coiled toward the heavens, gods walked with the heads of beasts, not as monsters but as perfected beings. Anubis, the jackal-headed guardian of the dead, didn't just symbolize death, he embodied its sacred paradox, with ears pricked for whispers of the departed and a muzzle sharp enough to sniff out deceit. He presided over the weighing of hearts with a precision that mirrored the jackals who prowled burial grounds, keeping scavengers at bay. His black fur wasn't a mark of darkness, but of fertile Nile sealed the promise of rebirth hidden in decay. When a pharaoh's body was anointed with oils and wrapped in linen, it wasn't just preservation. It was a transformation overseen by Anubis, the divine embalmer who turned mortality into a doorway. Horus, the falcon-headed sky god, carried a different kind of power in his wings. His piercing eyes, often depicted as the sun and moon, saw every treachery across the kingdom. But this wasn't just surveillance, it was sovereignty incarnate. Falcons soar higher than any other bird, their dive unstoppable, a fitting emblem for kings who claimed divine right. The famous Eye of Horus, torn out in his battle with Set and magically restored, became Egypt's ultimate symbol of healing and wholeness, yet there's a haunting edge to his myth. After avenging his father Osiris by defeating Set, Horus didn't just claim the throne, he absorbed the chaos god's essence, proving that even order must sometimes harness destruction to endure. Then there's Thoth, the ibis-headed scribe of the gods, whose curved beak seemed designed to carve wisdom into papyrus, or perhaps, as the baboon-headed version suggests, to chatter secrets to the dawn. He didn't just record history, he engineered it, inventing writing, mathematics, and even the calendar to measure the flooding Nile. When Osiris was murdered, it was Thoth who devised the spells to resurrect him, turning grief into a scaffold for eternity. His most subversive legend, the game he played with the moon, winning back 5 days to birth the year's final deities, time itself bent to his will. What unites these gods isn't just their animal visages, but how their hybrid forms reveal Egypt's worldview. Anubis's jackal reminds us death is a guardian, not an end. Horus's falcon teaches that true vision requires both height and focus. Thoth's ibis, probing the riverbanks, mirrors the mind seeking truth in life's murky waters. They weren't myths, they were mirrors, reflecting the belief that divinity isn't purely human, but the alchemy of all creation's wisdom. Across the sweeping plains and red rock canyons of Native American lore, no figure dances between wisdom and chaos quite like Coyote. He isn't just a trickster, he's a shapeshifter, a fool, a sage, and sometimes, against all odds, a reluctant hero. Picture him, lanky, grinning, his tail flicking with mischief as he schemes his way into trouble, only to stumble into lessons far deeper than he ever intended. One moment he's convincing the buffalo to stampede just for fun. The next, he's accidentally teaching the people how to fish by getting his paw stuck in a beaver's dam. Coyote doesn't just break rules, he unravels them, revealing the frayed edges of human pride and the unexpected gifts of humility. Take the Salish legend of how Coyote stole fire. It wasn't some noble quest, he wanted to roast a squirrel for dinner. But when the fire beings refused to share, Coyote didn't charge in like a warrior. He transformed into a scrawny, flea-bitten pup, whimpering at their camp until they took pity. Once inside, he waited for the guards to doze off, snatched an ember in his jaws, and bolted, scattering sparks across the land as he ran. The tribes gained warmth and light, but the story doesn't end with celebration. Coyote, singed and panting, learns the hard way that greed burns. He'd intended to keep the fire for himself, yet his own recklessness spread it farther than kindness ever could. Then there's the Navajo tale where Coyote, jealous of the people's perfect cornfields, convinces them to plant seeds upside down. The roots will reach the sky. He cackles. When the crops fail, famine looms, but Coyote, horrified by the consequences of his own prank, scrambles to fix it. He races to the underworld, outwits the grain spirits, and returns with golden kernels, teaching the people resilience through his own blunders. The lesson: even chaos can cultivate wisdom if you're willing to dig through the wreckage. What makes Coyote timeless isn't just his antics, but his humanity. He's the ultimate survivor, adapting when his plans crumble, like when he tries to fly by strapping birds to his arms, only to crash into a cactus, the punchline. He licks the spines, declaring them spicy, and saunters off like he meant to land there. These stories aren't just entertainment, they're survival manuals wrapped in laughter. The Crow people say Coyote made the world interesting, not safe. A reminder that perfection is brittle, but adaptability is unbreakable. Modern storytellers still channel his spirit. Think of Bugs Bunny outsmarting Elmer Fudd, or Loki's schemes in Norse myth tricksters who expose hypocrisy by turning order upside down. But Coyote stands apart because he's never purely villain or hero. He's the itch you can't scratch, the voice whispering, "What if you tried it this way?" even when this way ends with you howling at the moon, tangled in your own stolen fishing net. So the next time life knocks you flat, ask, what would Coyote do? Probably something ridiculous, but you might just laugh your way to a solution. Every Roman home hummed with invisible protectors, spirits so woven into daily life that forgetting them was like ignoring the air itself. The Lairs and Penates weren't distant gods on lofty Olympus. They lived in the pantry, the hearth, the crossroads just beyond the door. One misstep, a meal served without a scrap set aside, a threshold crossed without a muttered prayer, and the balance of the household could tilt toward misfortune. These weren't just superstitions, they were the sacred scaffolding of Roman life, as vital as the bricks holding up the walls. The Lees, often depicted as youthful figures dancing with raised cups, guarded the family's physical and spiritual borders. Their shrines stood at the heart of the home, the Lararium, a miniature temple where wine, honey cakes, and even the first bite of dinner were offered daily. But their reach extended beyond the front door. At neighborhood crossroads, public lairs compitels kept watch, their annual festival turning streets into feasts where slaves dined alongside masters, all under the spirit's temporary truce. This wasn't just piety, it was social glue, a reminder that even the empire's grandeur relied on invisible threads of domestic devotion. The Penates were even more intimate. These spirits of the storeroom ensured the oil didn't sour, the grain didn't mold. When Romans moved, they carried embers from the old hearth to kindle the new, a literal passing of the flame to keep the Penates' favor. Their name derives from penus, meaning the innermost part of the house, and that's where they thrived, in the quiet, cluttered spaces where survival was measured in full jars and stacked firewood. Neglect them and the consequences were immediate: spoiled food, coughing children, the creeping dread of scarcity. What's fascinating is how these rituals mirrored Rome's rise. Conquered cities weren't just stripped of gold. Their lairs were often adopted into Roman cults, a spiritual annexation that softened the blow of defeat. When Augustus rebuilt Rome after civil war, he didn't just restore temples, he revived the cult of the Lairs Augusti, tying loyalty to the state to the age-old practice of honoring household guardians. Even the Vestal Virgins tended a flame that symbolically linked every hearth in the empire, binding the domestic to the divine. Archaeology whispers of their ubiquity. Pompeii's ruins reveal Lararia painted with startling vibrancy, reds and yellows undimmed by centuries, frozen in moments of offering. In Ostia, a merchant's shrine bears soot marks from countless candles lit for safe voyages. These weren't grand monuments but humble acts of survival, proof that the might of Rome was built on thousands of daily whispers. Lairs protect us, Penates nourish us. Perhaps their greatest legacy is how they blur the line between mundane and sacred. Modern minds might dismiss tossing a handful of salt into the fire as quaint ritual, but to a Roman, it was as practical as locking the door at night. The Lairs and Penates didn't demand grand sacrifices, just consistency, attention, the quiet recognition that divinity dwells in the details. In an era of disposable convenience, their lesson lingers. The things we take for granted, shelter, food, safety, are never truly ours alone. They're shared with forces unseen, and sometimes the smallest offering is the strongest bridge between the human and the holy. The world plunged into darkness not by storm or eclipse but by divine heartbreak. Amaterasu, the radiant sun goddess of Japanese myth, had retreated into a celestial cave after her brother Susanu's unspeakable betrayal, drowning her sacred rice fields, flinging a skinned horse into her weaving hall and shattering the harmony of the heavens. Without her light, crops withered, spirits withered, and demons crept from the shadows, emboldened by the endless night. Desperation gripped the gods as prayers and offerings failed to lure her out. The cosmos itself teetered on collapse. Enter Aim-no-Usium, the goddess of dawn and revelry, whose solution was as audacious as it was ingenious. While the anxious deities assembled outside the cave's entrance, she overturned a wooden tub, stomped onto it, and began a dance so wildly provocative that the very stars paused to stare. She pounded her feet until the earth trembled, shed her robes with abandon, and laughed as her frenzied movements shook the branches of the celestial sakura tree. The other gods roared with forced laughter, clapping and cheering as if witnessing the greatest spectacle in existence. Curiosity gnawed at Amaterasu. What could possibly spark such joy in her absence? Peeking from the cave's edge, she caught her reflection in a mirror the gods had hung nearby, its polished surface gleaming like a second sun. "Who is this radiant being?" she murmured, momentarily blinded by her own brilliance. As she stepped closer, the gods seized their chance, yanking her free and sealing the cave behind her. Light flooded the world once more, life surging back into the land. But Aim-no-Usium's dance wasn't just clever trickery, it held layers of sacred symbolism. Her stomping prefigured the rhythmic footwork of Kagyura, the ceremonial dances still performed at Shinto shrines to summon divine blessings. The mirror, now enshrined at Ai's Grand Shrine, became one of Japan's 3 imperial regalia, embodying the sun goddess's wisdom. Even the laughter carried weight. In Shinto tradition, joy itself is a purifying force capable of dispelling malevolence. What makes this myth endure isn't just its drama, but its insight into human nature. Amaterasu's retreat mirrors our own moments of withdrawal. When grief or anger makes us hide from the world, Aim-no-Usium's solution teaches that sometimes healing begins not with solemnity, but with irreverent joy, a reminder that even gods need laughter to break the dark. And perhaps that's why, centuries later, Japanese festivals still erupt in dance and drumbeats, chasing shadows away one exuberant step at a time. Feathered serpents don't just slither, they soar. Quetzalcoatl, the Aztec god whose name means precious serpent, was no ordinary deity. His body coiled with the wisdom of the earth, while his iridescent plumage shimmered with the light of Venus, the morning star. To the Aztecs, he wasn't just a bringer of knowledge, he was the architect of civilization itself, the divine hand that taught humans agriculture, astronomy, and the sacred art of the calendar. His temples weren't built to inspire fear, but reverence pyramids adorned with carved serpents, their stone scales catching the dawn like living things. But Quetzalcoatl's greatest gift came at the steepest price. The myth of his self-sacrifice begins with a broken world humanity trapped in darkness, starving and ignorant, their prayers unheard by the distant gods. Moved by their suffering, Quetzalcoatl descended into Mictlan, the underworld, not as a conqueror but as a supplicant. The lord of the dead, Mictlantecutli, demanded a terrible toll. The god must bleed. So Quetzalcoatl pierced his own flesh, letting his divine blood drip onto the bones of the ancestors, mingling with the dust of those who had come before. From this union, humanity was reborn, a people forged from sacrifice, destined to honor the debt they could never repay. The tragedy of Quetzalcoatl lies in his downfall. As the story goes, his rival Tezcatlipoca, the smoking mirror, god of chaos, tricked him into drunkenness, shattering his purity. Disgraced, Quetzalcoatl fled eastward, burning his palaces behind him. Some say he immolated himself on a pyre, his heart rising to become Venus. Others claim he sailed away on a raft of serpents, vowing to return one day. This promise twisted into prophecy, haunting the Aztecs especially when Cortés arrived on their shores, his ship's sails billowing like serpent wings. What makes this legend so poignant isn't just the loss, but the lesson woven into it. Quetzalcoatl's story is one of duality, creation and destruction, wisdom and folly, divinity and fallibility. His feathered serpent form embodies this tension, earthbound yet celestial, a bridge between realms. Even his name holds contradiction, blending the Quetzal bird, symbolizing the heavens, with the cotal serpent rooted in the underworld. Modern scholars see echoes of historical upheaval in these myths. Was Quetzalcoatl based on a real priest-king, overthrown and exiled? The Aztec calendar's cycles suggest they expected his return, a hope that ironically paved the way for their undoing. Yet beyond history, his legacy endures in unexpected places. Mexican murals depicting him as a liberator, indigenous activists invoking his name in movements for justice. His story reminds us that even gods aren't immune to failure, and sometimes the greatest wisdom grows from the ashes of our mistakes. The Rainbow Bridge Bifrost wasn't just a pretty pathway. It was the trembling threshold between the world of the living and the realm of gods, a fiery arc crackling with the tension of destiny itself. Picture this, a bridge made not of wood or stone, but of 3 flaming strands, red as blood, blue as deep ice, white as Valkyrie wings that quaked under the weight of every soul crossing into Asgard. The Norse didn't see rainbows as mere weather. They were the pulse of the cosmos, vibrating with the footsteps of the divine. And guarding this luminous gateway stood Heimdall, the golden-toothed watchman whose horn could herald the end of all things. But Bifrost's brilliance hid a darker truth. It was a one-way bridge for most. While fallen warriors rode its radiant length to Valhalla's feasts, their mortal kin could only gaze upward, knowing their own passage to the afterlife would be far grimmer. A descent into ship burials or funeral pyres, their souls ferried across icy rivers by hell's skeletal hand. This duality mirrored Viking fatalism, the belief that glory and doom were 2 sides of the same coin. Even the bridge's eventual collapse at Ragnarök wasn't an accident. It was woven into its design, a reminder that no path, however divine, escapes the teeth of time. The bridge's 3 colors weren't arbitrary. Red symbolized the blood of oath-sworn bonds, blue the unforgiving sea that shaped Norse life, white the unblemished snow of untrodden battlefields. Together, they formed a codex of Viking values: loyalty, resilience, purity of purpose. Modern archaeologists note eerie parallels in the spectral lights of Iceland's auroras, nature's own Bifrost, which shimmer most vividly near ancient thing sites where laws were passed and fates decided. What's most haunting is how Bifrost's fragility reflects Norse metaphysics. Unlike the sturdy roads of Roman myth, this bridge could be severed by a giant's axe or the god's own hubris. Its fragility taught that even divinity hangs by a thread, and perhaps that's why warriors clutched their amulets tighter when rainbows arched over battlefields, praying the bridge would hold long enough to carry them home. The skies of Olympus weren't won in a single battle. They were forged through 3 cosmic wars that tested Zeus's rule to its limits. First came the Titanomachy, a 10-year cataclysm where the young Olympians clashed with the primordial titans. Picture the scene: mountains hurled like spears, tidal waves boiling under celestial fire, the very earth shuddering as Kronos, the titan who devoured his own children, faced his vengeful offspring. The Titans weren't just overthrown, they were unmade, their essence sealed in Tartarus, a prison so deep even time struggled to touch it, yet their echoes lingered. Oceanus, the titan of endless waters, remained as a reluctant ally, while Prometheus, ever the trickster, stole fire for humanity despite Zeus's wrath, proving that even defeat could seed rebellion. No sooner had Olympus's throne cooled than the Gigantomachy erupted. This time, the challengers weren't gods of old, but the giants' monstrous sons of Gaia, born from the blood of Uranus's castration. Unlike the Titans, these beings couldn't be felled by divine weapons alone. Each required a mortal strike to die, forcing gods and heroes into uneasy alliance. Heracle's arrows, dipped in Hydra venom, became the turning point. Ancient vases depict the chaos: Athena throttling a giant with her bare hands, Dionysus wielding a flaming torch, Zeus's thunderbolts splitting the sky like cracks in pottery. These weren't just battles, they were cosmic sieges where the fate of civilization hung on every arrow loosed, every boulder thrown. but the greatest threat emerged from Gaia's wrath Typhon, a storm made flesh. With 100 dragon heads that roared hurricanes and coils so massive they crushed mountains, he was chaos incarnate. The Gigantomachy had been war, the Typhonomachy was annihilation. Zeus's lightning barely singed him, and the other gods fled in terror, transforming into animals to hide a humiliating detail painters loved to immortalize on drinking cups. The king of gods finally triumphed by burying Typhon beneath Mount Etna, where his fiery breath still torments the earth. What makes these conflicts unforgettable isn't their scale, but their artistry. A 6th century BC amphora shows Zeus, muscles straining, heaving a thunderbolt at a cowering titan. A red figure crater captures Athena, calm amid carnage, her spear steady. These images weren't mere decoration, they were devotional acts, their brushstrokes whispering a warning. Even gods must fight to keep their heaven, and perhaps that's the real lesson, not how Zeus won, but how close, again and again, he came to losing. Etana, the ancient king of Kish, didn't seek gold or conquest, he longed for something far rarer. The plant of birth, a divine herb said to grant heirs to the childless. His quest wasn't scribbled on some forgotten parchment. It was pressed into clay tablets over 4,000 years ago, their cuneiform wedges preserving one of humanity's oldest tales of ambition and desperation. Unlike the thunderous epics of gods and monsters, Etana's story feels achingly human, a ruler who had everything except the one thing that would outlast him. The myth begins with an unlikely alliance. After saving a wounded eagle from a treacherous serpent, Etana earns the bird's gratitude. The eagle, once a majestic servant of the sun god Shamash, offers to carry him to the heavens where the birth plant grows. What follows isn't just a flight, it's a vertigo-inducing ascent into terror. Tablet fragments describe Etana clinging to the eagle's feathers as the earth shrinks below. First his kingdom becomes a speck, then the sea itself vanishes into the curvature of the world. The higher they rise, the thinner the air grows until even the eagle's wings tremble. In one heart-stopping moment, Etana looks down and sees only void. His courage shatters, and the eagle, sensing his panic, spirals back to earth in a dizzying plunge. But here's where the story twists. Earlier versions carved into Sumerian seals show Etana succeeding, clutching the plant triumphantly. Later Babylonian texts, though, imply his fall was fatal, a cautionary tale about reaching too high. Scholars debate whether these differing endings reflect shifting cultural values or simply the natural evolution of oral tradition. What's undeniable is the tale's endurance, etched into cylinder seals from the 3rd millennium BC, referenced in royal libraries like Ashurbanipal's at Nineveh, even echoing in the architecture of ziggurats whose stepped tiers might symbolize Etana's aborted climb. Modern eyes might see proto-science in this myth. Etana's view from above mirrors astronaut descriptions of Earth's curvature, while his breathless panic parallels the hypoxia pilots experience at high altitudes. The eagle, often linked to solar deities, could represent humanity's eternal yearning to touch the divine, only to be reminded of mortal limitations. Even the plant of birth resonates. Today's fertility treatments fulfill the same desperate hope that drove Etana skyward. Perhaps the most haunting lesson lies in the gaps between the tablets. The broken lines where Etana's fate hangs suspended remind us that some questions, whether about legacy, limits, or the price of desire, remain unresolved across millennia. His story endures not because it answers, but because it asks, how high would you climb for what you cannot live without? The story of Gainsha's elephant head isn't just a whimsical tale. It's a cosmic collision of love, fury, and divine irony that reveals Hinduism's deepest truths about imperfection and power. One version begins with Parvati, the goddess of creation, molding a child from the turmeric paste she used to cleanse her skin, a boy so radiant, so fiercely devoted, that she entrusted him to guard her bath chamber. When Shiva, her often absent husband, returned unannounced and found this unfamiliar boy barring his path, their confrontation escalated into catastrophe. The god of destruction, unused to being denied, severed the child's head in a flash of rage. Parvati's grief was so immense it threatened to unravel the universe itself. To mend what he'd broken, Shiva dispatched his followers to bring back the head of the first creature they found, a sleeping elephant, its wisdom etched in every wrinkle. But here's where the contradictions bloom like lotus flowers. In another telling, the elephant head isn't a replacement but a gift. The infant Ganesha, already divine, was decapitated not by Shiva but by the malevolent gaze of Saturn Shani, whose glance could incinerate worlds. Vishnu intervened, grafting the head of Indra's celestial elephant, Airavata, onto the child, transforming tragedy into transcendence. Some regional traditions whisper that Ganesha was born with the elephant's visage all along, a symbol of his inherent connection to memory, intelligence, and the unshakable strength of the earth. What unites these variations isn't the how, but the why. Ganesha's mismatched form embodies a profound paradox. The remover of obstacles is himself shaped by the ultimate obstacle, loss and rebirth. His broken tusk, sacrificed to transcribe the Mahabharata, mirrors this duality. He's the god who writes destiny with one hand while holding a bowl of sweets in the other, proving that wisdom and joy aren't opposing forces but intertwined. Archaeology offers tantalizing clues to his evolution. Early terracotta figurines from the 1st century show a pot-bellied deity with an ambiguous head, while Gupta-era carvings solidify his elephantine identity alongside his role as scribe and guardian. Even his name holds layers. Ganapati, Lord of Multitudes, hints at his roots as a tribal protector absorbed into the Hindu pantheon. Modern devotees don't just worship Ganesha, they engage with him. Before weddings, exams, or moon landings, his mantras are chanted not to erase challenges, but to navigate them with his trademark cleverness. A Mumbai engineer might rub a tiny Ganesha idol before a pitch, not magically expecting success, but channeling the god's ability to adapt. His broken tusk, a reminder that creation often demands sacrifice. His rotund belly, the capacity to digest life's bitter and sweet alike. So the next time you see his image, whether on a dashboard charm or a temple arch, remember, that elephant head isn't just a patch for a divine mistake. It's a living lesson that what makes us incomplete might also make us whole. The Arctic ice cracks with a sound like thunder, but the true ruler of these frozen waters doesn't walk on land. She dwells in the crushing dark below, her fingers forming the creatures that sustain life and her wrath dictating who will eat and who will starve. Sedna, the Inuit sea goddess, wasn't born divine. She was forged by betrayal. Once a mortal woman, her father, desperate to save himself during a storm, threw her overboard their kayak. As she clung to the side, pleading, he hacked off her fingers one by one until the ocean claimed her. But the depths didn't kill Sedna, they transformed her. Her severed fingers became seals, walruses, and whales, and her shattered trust became the foundation of a terrifying new power. Now ruling Adlavan, the underwater realm of the dead, Sedna's tangled hair swirls with the souls of drowned animals. When hunters break taboos, wasting meat, disrespecting the catch, she tangles it further, withholding game until the people repent. Shamans must then undertake a harrowing spirit journey, diving through layers of ice and monster-filled waters to comb her hair, soothing her fury with songs and promises of better stewardship. These aren't mere rituals, they're survival contracts. A community's fate hinges on Sedna's mood, making her the ultimate arbiter of ecological balance in a world where hunger is never more than one failed hunt away. What chills the bones isn't just her vengeance, but her duality. Sedna isn't a mindless destroyer, she's a wounded guardian. The same hands that unleash famines also sculpt the animals that nourish her people. Inuit carvings often show her with a sorrowful face, a reminder that her punishments stem from grief, not cruelty. Modern climate scientists note eerie parallels in this ancient story. Overfish the waters and the sea will retaliate. Sedna's taboos: don't hunt too greedily, honor what you kill, mirror modern conservation ethics, proving some truths are timeless, whether whispered in shamanic chants or printed in fisheries reports. Among the floating ice floes, Sedna's legacy isn't just myth. It's a living dialogue between humans and the unforgiving world they depend on. To ignore her is to risk more than supernatural ire. It's to forget that in the Arctic, survival has always been a pact, not a given. And in an era of melting ice and shifting currents, her warnings echo louder than ever. Brighid's flame doesn't flicker, it transforms. In the misty highlands and emerald valleys of the Celtic world, she wasn't just a goddess, she was a trinity of power, her influence seeping into every crack and forge of daily life. As a healer, her touch could knit flesh and soothe fevered brows with herbs whispered into potency. As a poet, her words wove destiny itself, inspiring bards to craft verses that outlasted stone. And as a smith, her hammer strikes sang with creation, shaping swords and plowshares alike in fires said to burn with otherworldly light. This wasn't just divine multitasking. It was a sacred blueprint for how the Celts understood mastery, where skill, inspiration, and practicality were threads of the same unbroken circle. Her healing wells still dot the Irish landscape, their waters curling with steam even in winter, as if refusing to let the cold touch what Brigid had blessed. Pilgrims once left ribbons clooties tied to nearby trees, each strip a silent prayer for mending. But her healing wasn't just physical. Poets invoked her to cure writer's block, their verses considered a kind of spiritual surgery on the soul. The same hands that could mend a wound could also stoke a forge, and here lies the genius of her triple aspect. The smith's fire wasn't just for crafting tools, but for tempering the self. A blade folded 100 times became unbreakable. So too, the Celts believed, did a person tested by life's trials. When Christianity spread across Celtic lands, Brigid's legacy didn't vanish, it shapeshifted. Monks cleverly recast her as Saint Brigid of Kildare, keeper of a sacred flame said to burn for centuries without ash. Her feast day, Imbolc on February 1st, retained the old rites. Straw dolls called bridogs were paraded door to door, symbolizing the goddess's journey to bless each home. Even the act of crafting these dolls echoed her smith's hands, tying the mundane to the divine. The poetic invocations became prayers, the healing wells became holy shrines, but the essence remained, a tribute to the triple rhythm of creating, sustaining, and renewing. Modern witches and metalworkers still honor Brigid's forge as a metaphor for inner transformation. A blacksmith's apprentice might whisper her name when quenching red-hot steel, watching the steam rise like old invocations. A poet might light a candle before drafting verses, calling on the muse who blurred the line between art and magic. And in hospitals, nurses in Ireland sometimes murmur to Brigid's cloak when tucking in patients, a nod to the saint's legend of expanding her mantle to claim land for the poor. Brigid's power endures because it isn't locked in the past. It's a living current flowing through every act of creation, whether that's a poem, a healed body, or a piece of iron wrought into purpose. She reminds us that divinity isn't just about worship, it's about the work of our hands, the fire of our words, and the courage to mend what's broken. In the beginning, according to Yoruba tradition, the universe was a swirling expanse of mist and water. No land, no life, only the vast cosmic ocean. Into this watery chaos stepped Obatala, the Sky Father, charged by the supreme god Olodumare with the sacred task of creation. Given a snail shell filled with sacred soil, a golden chain, and a 5-toed chicken, he descended from the heavens, pouring the earth onto the primordial waters. The chicken, with its careful scratching, spread the soil into solid ground, forming the first land at Isle Ife, the cradle of Yoruba civilization. But here's where the legend twists. Obatala, in his excitement, drank too much palm wine and stumbled, shaping some humans with imperfections, the blind, the lame, those born different. Though chastened by his mistake, he became their protector, a god intimately tied to the vulnerable, proving that even divine hands can falter. Yet Obatala wasn't the only architect of existence. Enter Ogdoad, often called the warrior king of creation. In some versions, he's Obatala's rival, in others, his successor or even a complementary force. Where Obatala worked with patience and artistry, Ogdoad wielded decisive action. When Obatala's drunkenness halted creation, Ogdoad seized the tools and finished the work, establishing order, kingship, and the first Yoruba dynasty. His legacy isn't just in the land, but in the very idea of governance, tying earthly rule to divine mandate. To this day, Yoruba kings trace their lineage to Ogdoad, their coronation rituals echoing his primordial authority. The tension between these two creators, Obatala's meticulous care and Ogdoad's bold pragmatism, mirrors the Yoruba understanding of balance. Creation requires both inspiration and force. Then there's Orunmila, the third pillar of this cosmic trinity. While Obatala shaped bodies and Ogdoad built kingdoms, Orunmila gifted humanity something far more elusive, the ability to navigate destiny itself. The god of wisdom and divination, he witnessed the birth of each soul, memorizing their paths like lines in a sacred text. His voice still speaks through the Ifa oracle, a system of coded verses and palm nuts consulted for guidance. Unlike the distant gods of other traditions, Orunmila is a teacher, his wisdom accessible to those who seek it. Priests trained in Ifa spend decades unraveling his verses, each one a key to life's crossroads. His presence tempers the raw power of creation with foresight, because what use is a world without the means to understand it? Together, these three deities form a tapestry of cosmic collaboration. Obatala's flawed humanity reminds us that creation is messy. Ogdoad's kingship imposes structure, and Orunmila's wisdom offers a way through the chaos. Modern Yoruba culture still thrums with their influence, from the Ifa divination sessions steering personal choices to the annual festivals honoring Ogdoad's lineage. Even the disputes over their roles, whether Ogdoad usurped Obatala or aided him, reflect a deeper truth. Creation is never a single act, but an ongoing dialogue between order and adaptation. These aren't just myths locked in the past, they're living conversations about how the world is made and remade every day. The Jade Emperor's celestial court wasn't just heaven, it was a mirror. Every ministry, every rank, every bow and scroll in his divine bureaucracy reflected the Confucian ideals that governed imperial China for millennia. Picture this, a cosmic forbidden city, its gates guarded by celestial generals, its halls thronged with deities who didn't just wield power, they filed paperwork. The Thunder Department kept meticulous records of each lightning strike. The Ministry of Epidemics tracked diseases like a celestial census. Even the stars were governed by an astronomical bureau, their movements calculated by immortal scribes. This wasn't chaos shaped into order, it was order exalted to divinity. At the heart of it all sat the Jade Emperor, Yudi, less a thunderbolt-wielding king than the ultimate civil servant. Unlike Zeus or Odin, he didn't rule through passion or whimsy, but through protocol. His authority wasn't just inherited, it was earned through eons of virtuous governance, a meritocratic twist that would have made Confucius nod in approval. Legends say he spent 3,000 kalpas, each longer than a human can fathom, cultivating wisdom before ascending to the throne. No wonder his court functioned like clockwork. Every deity, from the kitchen god reporting household deeds to the dragon kings managing regional rainfall, answered to a strict hierarchy. Even blessings required triplicate petitions. The parallels to earthly dynasties were deliberate. Emperors claimed the mandate of heaven by emulating Yudi's bureaucracy, appointing mortal officials to mirror celestial ones. Provincial magistrates became earthly counterparts to the city gods who judged local souls. The lunar calendar, used to schedule festivals and harvests, was directly tied to the celestial ministry of time. This wasn't just myth reinforcing power, It was a spiritual framework that made the vast, unwieldy empire feel interconnected, from the lowliest farmer offering incense to the son of heaven kneeling before the altar of the sky. Yet the system had cracks. Folk tales often poked fun at heaven's red tape, like the Monkey King's son, Wukong, crashing the celestial gates after being denied a proper rank, or the star-crossed lovers Xinu and Niulang, separated by the Milky Way because love couldn't override bureaucratic decree. These stories revealed a subtle truth. Even the Jade Emperor's perfect order couldn't stifle every rebellion of the heart. The legacy of this cosmic bureaucracy still lingers. Modern Chinese idioms like "thanking the heavens and earth" or "the mountains are high and the emperor is far away" echo the old belief in a watchful but distant celestial order. And perhaps that's the real lesson of Yudi's court, not that heaven mirrors earth, but that the most enduring power isn't seized but meticulously maintained, one virtuous edict at a time. In the dry cliffs of Mole, where the Bandiagara escarpment rises like a fortress against the sky, the Dogon people have guarded a secret for centuries, a celestial knowledge so precise it defies easy explanation. Their mythology speaks of the Nommo, amphibious beings who descended from the heavens in a spinning ark, bringing wisdom to humanity. But what makes their story stand out isn't just the vivid imagery, it's the startlingly accurate astronomical details embedded within it. According to Dogon tradition, the Nommo came from a star system near Sirius, the brightest star in Earth's night sky. But here's the twist: they described Sirius not as a single star, but as part of a binary system with an invisible companion they called Potolo, a dense, heavy star that orbits Sirius every 50 years. This detail sent shockwaves through the scientific community when anthropologists first documented it in the 1930s. At the time, astronomers had only confirmed Sirius B, the white dwarf companion of Sirius, a few decades earlier, a discovery requiring advanced telescopes and mathematical calculations. How could the Dogon, a remote tribe with no apparent access to modern astronomy, have known about a star invisible to the naked eye? Some researchers, like French ethnographer Marcel Graillul, argued the Dogon preserved this knowledge through oral tradition, passed down from generation to generation since antiquity. Others proposed even more controversial theories, suggesting the Nommo might represent ancient contact with an advanced civilization, extraterrestrial or otherwise. But skepticism soon followed. Critics pointed out that the Dogon's interactions with Westerners in the early 20th century could have introduced astronomical concepts, blending them with existing myths. They noted that Sirius B, while faint, had been theorized long before its official discovery, leaving room for cultural diffusion. Yet even this explanation doesn't entirely unravel the mystery. The Dogon's precise description of Potolo's elliptical orbit and its metallic composition, Sirius B, is indeed incredibly dense, with a teaspoon of its matter weighing tons, feels too specific for casual borrowing. The debate speaks to a larger question: how do we interpret the intersection of myth and science? The Dogon's cosmology doesn't stop at Sirius. They chart the movements of planets, describe Saturn's rings, and even reference Jupiter's 4 largest moons, all without telescopes. Some see this as evidence of lost knowledge, while others argue it's a testament to human ingenuity, the ability to observe and theorize without modern tools. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. The night sky, after all, is humanity's first classroom, and cultures worldwide have developed sophisticated ways to track celestial patterns. What's undeniable is the richness of the Dogon tradition. The Nommo aren't just alien visitors, they're teachers, healers, and sometimes stern judges, embodying the sacred balance between water and sky, chaos and order. Their story, whether read as myth or encoded science, challenges our assumptions about what ancient cultures knew and how they knew it. The cliffs of Bandiagara still whisper their secrets, reminding us that the stars above might hold stories we've only begun to understand. The gods never really left us, they just traded their temples for movie screens and comic book panels. Take Marvel's Thor, stripped straight from Norse myth but retooled for a modern audience. He's still the thunder-wielding son of Odin, but now he's cracking jokes with Iron Man and grappling with daddy issues in IMAX glory. The MCU didn't just borrow his hammer, it amplified his mythos, turning Ragnarok from a doom-laden prophecy into a cosmic rebirth with a synth-pop soundtrack. Yet beneath the CGI spectacle, the core remains, a god learning humility, a theme as old as the Eddas themselves. Even Loki's chaotic charm, equal parts trickster and tragic antihero, mirrors his mythic roots, where he's both the architect of Baldur's death and the reluctant mother of Odin's eight-legged horse. Marvel didn't invent these arcs, it plugged them into a new kind of storytelling lightning rod. Video games have done the same, but with interactivity that makes the divine feel personal. In God of War, Kratos doesn't just battle Norse gods, he steps into their stories like a wrecking ball, forcing players to reckon with the collateral damage of godhood. The game's portrayal of Baldur as a tormented figure, immune to pain yet starving for sensation, twists his mythic innocence into something achingly human. Meanwhile, Hades turns Greek underworld bureaucracy into a roguelike mechanic, where Zagreus's endless escapes mirror Sisyphus's toil, but with a killer soundtrack and snarky commentary from Dionysus. These aren't just Easter eggs for mythology nerds, they're proof that ancient archetypes, the rebellious son, the absent father, the cycle of vengeance, still pulse with raw relevance. Even advertising co-opts divine imagery. Nike, named for the winged goddess of victory, slaps her swoosh on shoes, turning athletic triumph into a secular sacrament. The Axe Effect commercials, basically modern odes to Aphrodite, selling attraction in a spray can. And let's not forget how cryptocurrency bros worship, hodl like a financial mantra, their Bitcoin bulls echoing the sacred cattle of Indus Valley deities. The mediums have changed, but the impulses haven't. We still crave larger-than-life figures to explain our wins and losses, to make sense of chaos through stories that feel timeless. Perhaps the most fascinating evolution is in how these myths adapt to contemporary values. Wonder Woman's origin as an Amazonian demigod now grapples with feminist rereadings, while American Gods pits Odin and Anubis against the new deities of media and technology. These narratives don't just regurgitate the old tales, they interrogate them, asking what happens when gods collide with globalization or when immortality meets the internet age. The answer: they survive but never unchanged, because the best myths aren't relics, they're mirrors, reflecting whatever culture holds them up. And right now, they're showing us a world where the divine is whatever we swipe, stream, or stan. Göbekli Tepe's towering stone pillars, carved over 11,000 years ago, don't just hint at forgotten rituals. They scream myth made manifest. T-shaped monoliths loom like silent sentinels, their surfaces etched with intricate reliefs of foxes, scorpions, and vultures in mid-hunt. But these aren't mere decorations. They're a prehistoric storyboard depicting scenes so eerily similar to later Mesopotamian myths that archaeologists wonder if they're staring at humanity's first divine narrative. One pillar shows a headless man surrounded by carrion birds, a scene mirroring the epic of Gilgamesh, where the hero's friend Enkidu dreams of death as a place where the bird of prey feasts on my flesh. The stones predate writing by millennia, yet they whisper of belief so enduring they'd echo across civilizations yet unborn. Half a world away, the Aztec Sun stone, often mislabeled the calendar stone, bears its own cosmic testimony. 25 tons of basalt carved with meticulous precision. It's not just a timekeeper but a layered atlas of legend. At its center, the face of Tanatia, the fifth sun, demands sacrificial hearts to keep the world from plunging into eternal night, a myth chillingly validated by the thousands of human remains found at Templo Maya. Surrounding him, the four previous suns: Jaguar, Wind, Fire, Rain, and water mirror the destruction cycles described in codices like the Legend of the Suns. But here's the twist. Geochemical analysis reveals the stone's pigments include sacred teotihuacan, divine stone imported from conquered lands, proving the Aztecs didn't just tell these stories, they built empires on them. Then there's the Nebra sky disk, unearthed in Germany with a celestial map so accurate it could still navigate by Bronze Age stars. Its gold inlays depict the Pleiades cluster, a constellation tied to Greek, Babylonian, and even Maori myths about planting and harvest. But the real shock, the disk was buried with swords and axes around 1600 BCE, the same era Mycenaean bards might have been singing of Orion's belt. Coincidence or evidence of a shared astral lore stretching across continents? These artifacts don't just illustrate myths, they force us to rewrite history. When Hittite seals bearing storm gods match tempest descriptions in Hurrian hymns, or when Polynesian navigation charts double as star ancestor genealogies, the line between legend and record blurs. Perhaps the deepest truth lies in what these objects share, not just craftsmanship but urgency. Our ancestors didn't carve gods into stone for decoration. They were pleading, documenting, promising, staking their survival on stories they needed the universe to remember. From the firelight tales of our ancestors to the blockbuster myths of today, one truth remains: we are storytelling creatures hungry for the divine. These legends aren't just relics, they're mirrors reflecting our deepest fears, wildest hopes, and stubborn refusal to accept a world without wonder. Think about it. Why do we still whisper Gilgamesh's name after 4,000 years? Why do kids today dress as Thor for Halloween? Because these stories aren't about gods. They're about us, the loneliness of Sedna, the cunning of Coyote, the flawed heroism of the hero twins. They give shape to emotions too big for ordinary words. But here's the magic. These myths belong to everyone. Maybe your grandmother told you about the rainbow serpent, or you stumbled upon Izanagi's grief in a manga. Perhaps you felt Collie's fierce love or laughed at Maui's antics in a Disney film. That's the thread connecting us across time and space, the shared need to make sense of life's chaos through something grander. And the conversation isn't over. Every retelling, from ancient cave art to TikTok lore videos, adds another stitch to this vast, ever-growing tapestry. So now it's your turn. Drop your favorite legend in the comments, the one that gives you chills or makes you see the world differently. Was it a tale whispered at bedtime? A god you encountered in a game or comic? Let's keep these stories alive, because as long as we keep sharing them, the divine never really fades. And if you're craving more mythic deep dives, hit subscribe. We've only scratched the surface. The next legend is waiting, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming. After all, the oldest stories still have the sharp